Admiral Zathara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the stars disappear one by one. Each fading light meant another world was gone. Another billion lives snuffed out like candles in the wind. The Thylorian defense fleet hung in space around their home world like toys facing a storm. Their ships were beautiful things, all smooth curves and crystal panels that caught starlight and turned it into rainbow patterns. They had been built for exploration and peace. They were never meant for war. "Admiral, we're getting reports from the outer colonies," her communications officer said. His blue fur was standing on end with fear. "The Vraktar have reached Kellyan Prime. The planet is gone." Zathara closed her large eyes. Kellyan Prime had been home to 3 billion Thylorians. Now it was nothing but empty space and floating debris. The swarm had eaten everything. The metal, the rock, even the atmosphere. They left nothing behind. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. 6 days, Admiral. Maybe 7 if we're lucky." Lucky? Zathara almost laughed, but there was no humor left in her. The Thylorian Federation had ruled 12 star systems in peace for 800 years. They had never fought a real war. Their weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. Their soldiers were trained to capture, not kill. The Vraktar swarm cared nothing for such gentle ways. She had watched the first attacks on the outer worlds through long-range sensors. The swarm ships looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. They moved through space in massive clouds, billions of smaller craft surrounding planet-sized motherships. When they found a world, they covered it like ants on sugar. The Thylorians had tried to fight. Their energy weapons could cut through swarm armor, but the creatures just kept coming. For every one they killed, 10 more took its place. And the swarm learned quickly. By the third world, their armor had adapted to resist Thylorian weapons. "Admiral," her science officer called out, "I'm detecting movement in the Helix Nebula. Long-range scans show thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The main swarm fleet was coming. Zathara walked to the center of the bridge and activated the fleet-wide communications. Her face appeared on screens throughout the defense fleet. She could see the fear in her people's eyes, but also trust. They believed she would find a way to save them. She wished she shared their faith. "People of the Federation," she began, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her heart. "The enemy approaches our home. In 6 days they will be here. Our weapons cannot stop them. Our shields cannot hold them, but we will not surrender." She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. These were good people. They had spent their lives exploring the galaxy, making friends with other species, sharing knowledge and culture. They deserved better than this. "Prepare the beacon," she ordered. Her communications officer looked up in surprise. "Admiral, the deep space beacon has not been used in 300 years. We're not even sure it still works." "Make it work," Zathara said firmly. "Send a message to every corner of the galaxy. Tell them what's happening here. Tell them the swarm will not stop with us. Ask for help." The beacon was ancient technology built by the first Thylorian space explorers. It could send messages across vast distances, reaching the far edges of known space. But it took enormous energy to operate, and there was no guarantee anyone would answer. The crew worked through the night, repairing old circuits and calibrating the massive transmitter. As they worked, reports kept coming in from the outer systems. More worlds gone, more billions dead. The swarm was moving faster now, as if it could smell the fear from the last free Thylorian worlds. Finally, the beacon was ready. Zathara stood before the transmitter, thinking about what to say. How do you ask strangers to die for you? How do you explain the horror that was coming without sounding like you've lost your mind? She pressed the activation switch and began to speak. "This is Admiral Zathara of the Thylorian Federation. We are sending this message to any civilization capable of receiving it. We are under attack by a force beyond our ability to resist. The enemy calls itself the Vraktar Swarm. They consume entire worlds. They leave nothing alive. Nothing at all." She paused, gathering her thoughts. In the background, she could hear her crew monitoring the approaching swarm. "We have tried to fight them. Our weapons are useless. Our defenses mean nothing to them. They adapt to everything we throw at them, and they never stop coming. In 6 days, they will reach our home world. In 6 days, the Thylorian Federation will cease to exist." Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "We are not asking you to save us. It may already be too late for that. But the swarm will not stop with our worlds. They will keep spreading, keep consuming until nothing remains. If there is anyone out there who can fight these creatures, please. We're begging you. Help us stop them before they devour the entire galaxy." She included the coordinates of their star system and everything they had learned about swarm technology. It wasn't much, but it might help whoever answered the call, if anyone answered at all. The message went out into the darkness, traveling faster than light toward distant stars. Zathara knew it would take time to reach the far edges of the galaxy, and more time for anyone to respond. Time they probably didn't have. Days passed. The swarm grew closer. Refugee ships arrived from the outer colonies, carrying the few survivors who had managed to escape. The stories they told were all the same. Darkness falling from the sky, cities consumed in hours, people trying to run, but there was nowhere to go. On the fourth day, responses began to arrive. The first came from the Centauri Republic. "We have received your message. Our hearts go out to you, but our fleet is too small to help. We will remember your sacrifice." The second came from the Andromedan Alliance. "The swarm you describe sounds similar to legends from our ancient texts. We thought them myths. Our war fleet departed yesterday, but we fear we will arrive too late." More messages came. Expressions of sympathy, promises to remember. A few offered small fleets, but nothing that could make a real difference. The galaxy was full of peaceful species like the Thylorians. None of them were prepared for something like the swarm. On the fifth day, with swarm scouts already probing the outer edge of their system, a different kind of message arrived. It was short, simple. The translation software struggled with some of the concepts, but the meaning was clear enough. Coordinates received en route. Admiral Sarah Chen, Terran Defense Corps. Zathara had never heard of Terrans or humans, but something about the message felt different. There was no sympathy, no promises to remember their sacrifice. Just a simple statement of fact. They were coming. She looked up the species in the galactic database. The entry was brief and confusing. Humans were a young species, having only achieved faster-than-light travel recently. Their homeworld was listed as a Class 12 death world, whatever that meant. The database suggested they were omnivores with predatory instincts. It didn't sound like much hope, but it was the only hope they had. Zathara stood on her bridge, watching the sensors as the first swarm ships entered their system. Behind them, she knew, came horrors beyond imagination. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, help was coming. She just hoped these humans were more than they seemed. The human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Thylorian system, like ghosts becoming real. One moment the space was empty, the next it was full of gray metal vessels that looked nothing like any ship design in the galactic database. Admiral Zathara watched the sensors with growing confusion. The human fleet was small, maybe 30 ships total. Some were huge, bigger than anything the Thylorians had ever built. Others were tiny, barely larger than fighters, but all of them radiated energy signatures that made her ship's computers issue warning alerts. "Admiral," her science officer said, his voice shaking, "those ships are putting out more power than our entire defense fleet combined." "What are they?" Before Zathara could answer, her communications officer called out, "We're getting a transmission from the lead human ship. Audio and visual. Put it through." The main screen flickered and a human face appeared. Admiral Chen looked exactly like the database had described. Bipedal, mammalian, with forward-facing eyes that marked her species as predators. But seeing her in person was different. Those eyes held a cold intelligence that made Zathara's fur stand on end. "Admiral Zathara," Chen said, her voice carrying an accent the translators couldn't quite capture. "I'm Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Corps. We received your distress call. What's your current situation?" "Admiral Chen," Zathara replied, trying to keep the relief out of her voice. "The swarm scouts have entered our system. The main fleet will arrive within hours. We have perhaps 500,000 military vessels, but our weapons are not designed for this kind of warfare." Chen nodded. "Understood. We're scanning your defenses now. Your ships are built for precision and minimal collateral damage. That won't work against the swarm. We'll need to coordinate our attack. Your fleet seems small," Zathara said carefully. She didn't want to offend these humans who had come to help, but 30 ships against the millions that were coming seemed hopeless. A smile crossed Chen's face, but it wasn't a happy expression. It reminded Zathara of the look a hunter wore when stalking prey. "Don't worry about our numbers. We brought enough firepower to crack a moon. The question is whether you can handle what comes next." Before Zathara could ask what that meant, alarms started blaring across her ship. "Contact," her tactical officer shouted. "Swarm bioships emerging from faster-than-light travel. Hundreds of them." The swarm scouts looked exactly like the reports had described. They were things from nightmares, part machine and part insect. their dark hulls covered in what looked like armor plating that moved and shifted like living skin. They flew in perfect formation, like a school of predatory fish. All Thylorian ships maintained defensive positions around the planet. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. Do not engage the enemy. Repeat, do not engage. Leave this to us. Admiral, with respect, Zathara began, but Chen cut her off. Trust me, you've never seen anything like what we're about to do. Just protect your civilians and stay out of our way. The human ships moved forward to meet the swarm with a speed that defied physics. They accelerated at rates that should have turned their crews into paste, but somehow they held together. As they moved, weapons ports opened along their hulls, revealing arrays of devices that made Zathara's computers scream warnings about dangerous energy buildup. The first human ship to engage the swarm was one of the smaller vessels, about the size of a Thylorian cruiser. A dozen swarm bioships swarmed toward it like antibodies attacking an infection. Then the human ship opened fire. What came out of its weapons was not energy beams or projectiles. It was something that bent space itself, creating ripples in reality that tore the swarm ships apart at the molecular level. Where the ripples touched the bioships, they simply stopped existing. By the ancestors, Zathara whispered. But the humans weren't done. More ships engaged, and the space around the planet became a light show of impossible weapons. Some ships fired what looked like miniature stars. Others launched projectiles that seemed to ignore the laws of physics, curving around obstacles and striking targets from impossible angles. The swarm fought back with everything they had. Bioships launched clouds of smaller fighters, organisms designed for space combat that could survive in vacuum. They fired weapons that dissolved metal and energy beams that could cut through shields like paper. But for every human ship they damaged, 2 more appeared to take its place. And the humans fought differently than anything the swarm had ever faced. Zathara watched in horrified fascination as a human destroyer, its hull breached and atmosphere venting into space, rammed itself directly into a swarm bioship 3 times its size. The explosion lit up half the system. Admiral Chen, Zathara called over the communication channel, your ship just destroyed itself. Why would your captain do that? Because it was the most effective way to take out that bioship, Chen replied calmly as if discussing the weather. Don't worry. Captain Morrison knew what he was doing. He saved his crew using escape pods before impact. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, every swarm scout ship was destroyed or disabled. The humans had lost 5 ships, but somehow they had managed to save most of their crews. As the debris cleared, Admiral Chen requested permission to come aboard Zathara's flagship for a face-to-face meeting. She arrived an hour later with a small security detail. The humans were smaller than Thylorians, but they moved with a controlled violence that made Zathara's guards nervous. They carried weapons that looked simple but radiated the same dangerous energy signatures as their ships. Admiral, Chen said as she entered the conference room, we need to talk. That was just a scouting force. The real swarm is coming and you're not ready for what that means. What do you mean? Zathara asked. Chen activated a holographic display showing the approaching swarm fleet. The image made every Thylorian in the room step backward. Thousands of bioships, some the size of moons, accompanied by clouds of smaller vessels that numbered in the millions. This is what's coming, Chen said. They'll be here in 12 hours. Your current defenses will last maybe 10 minutes. Then what do you suggest? We evacuate your non-combatants to the outer system. Your military ships stay here to help coordinate the defense, but understand something. This is going to get ugly. Really ugly. We're going to use weapons that can crack planets. We're going to fight in ways that will horrify you, because that's what it takes to stop something like the swarm. Zathara looked around the room at her officers. They were all thinking the same thing. These humans had just destroyed an enemy that had conquered dozens of worlds, and they made it look easy. But there was something frightening about the casual way they talked about planet-cracking weapons and horrifying tactics. Admiral Chen, Zathara said slowly, what kind of species are you humans? Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer, almost sad. We're the kind of species that evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. Where the weather could wipe out entire continents. Where the animals hunted in packs and never gave up once they caught your scent. She gestured to her security detail. Every human here has ancestors who survived ice ages, plagues, wars that killed millions, and disasters that would have wiped out most species. We learned to fight because if we didn't fight, we died. And now? Zathara asked. Now we fight so others don't have to die, Chen said. But we're still the same species that crawled out of hell and decided we wanted to see the stars. When the real swarm arrives, you're going to see what that means. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The main swarm fleet had dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the conference room's windows, Zethara could see lights appearing in the darkness. Thousands of them. Millions of them. The swarm had arrived, and it blotted out the stars. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped off the human transport ship and onto the Thylorian space station, with the easy confidence of someone who had walked on a dozen different worlds. Behind her came a team of scientists, engineers, and military advisors who would help coordinate the defense against the swarm. Admiral Zethara met them at the docking port. Up close, the humans looked even stranger than they had on the video screens. They were bipedal like Thylorians, but shorter and more compact. Their skin came in different colors and their hair ranged from black to blonde to gray. But it was their eyes that disturbed her most. Forward-facing like predators, constantly moving to assess threats. Dr. Vasquez, Zethara said, offering the traditional Thylorian greeting of open palms. Thank you for coming. We have prepared quarters for your team. Elena smiled and Zethara tried not to flinch at the sight of those white teeth. Thank you, Admiral. But before we get settled, we need to talk about what you're dealing with here, and what you've gotten yourselves into by asking us for help. They gathered in the station's main conference room, which had been hastily modified to accommodate human furniture. The Thylorian Council was there, along with representatives from other Federation species. They all stared at the humans with a mixture of hope and fear. Elena activated a holographic display showing Earth from space. It looked like a beautiful blue-green world with swirling clouds and vast oceans. This is our home, she said. It looks peaceful, doesn't it? The Thylorians nodded. It's not. Elena changed the display, showing massive storms that could level cities, earthquakes that split continents, and volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. Earth is what we call a Class 12 death world. The weather alone has nearly wiped us out dozens of times in our history. How do you survive on such a world? Asked Counselor Thrin, an elderly Thylorian with silver fur. We adapt, said Colonel Marcus Webb, the human military advisor. We learn. We fight back. When a storm destroys our cities, we build them stronger. When diseases kill millions of us, we develop medicines. When predators hunt us, we become better hunters. Elena changed the display again, showing early humans on the African plains. Millions of years ago, we were just another prey species. We were slower than the big cats, weaker than the bears, smaller than the elephants. We should have gone extinct. What changed? Zethara asked. We learned to work together, Elena said. And we learned something else that makes us different from most species in the galaxy. We learned to be persistent. When a lion gives up the chase, we keep following. When winter kills our crops, we find new food. When our enemies adapt to our weapons, we develop better weapons. She showed images of human history. Wars, plagues, disasters, explorations into hostile environments. Other species see these as tragedies. We see them as learning experiences. Every time something tries to kill us, we get a little bit harder to kill. The Thylorians shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their own history was one of peaceful exploration and discovery. They had never faced anything like what the humans described. Tell them about the games, Elena, Colonel Webb said with something that might have been amusement. Games? Counselor Thrin asked. Elena looked embarrassed. Human recreational activities often involve simulated danger. We compete in sports where serious injury is common. We watch stories about characters facing impossible odds. Our children play games that teach them tactical thinking and combat skills. Why? Zethara asked. Because it's fun, Colonel Webb said simply. Because we like challenges. Because somewhere deep in our genetic memory, we remember that life is dangerous and we need to be ready for it. Dr. Kim Sato, the human technical specialist, opened another display. We've analyzed the swarm bioships your scouts captured. The creatures inside are purpose-built for war. They have redundant organs, rapid healing abilities, and neural systems that adapt to new threats within hours. Then how do we fight them? Zethara asked. The same way we fought everything else that's tried to kill us, Elena said. We study them. We find their weaknesses. We adapt faster than they do. And if that doesn't work, we hit them harder than they can possibly imagine, Colonel Webb finished. Admiral Chen wasn't exaggerating when she said we brought planet crackers. We have weapons that can ignite gas giants, turn asteroids into kinetic missiles, and create artificial black holes. The conference room fell silent. The Thylorians stared at the humans with growing horror. You have weapons that can destroy planets? Counselor Thrin whispered. We have weapons that can destroy solar systems, Dr. Sato said matter-of-factly. But we're very careful about when and how we use them. Why? Zethara asked. If you have such power, why don't you rule the galaxy? Elena and Colonel Webb exchanged a look. It was Elena who answered. Because we learned something else during our evolution. We learned the difference between surviving and becoming monsters. We could conquer other species, but then we'd become the thing we spent millions of years fighting against. Besides, Colonel Webb added, ruling the galaxy sounds like a lot of paperwork. Despite everything, several Thylorians made the chittering sound that was their version of laughter. But the mood grew serious again as Dr. Sato pulled up new intelligence data. We've been monitoring swarm communication since the first scout attack. The main force isn't just coming to consume your worlds. They're coming because they've identified humans as a new threat. What do you mean? Zethara asked. The swarm has a collective intelligence, Elena explained. Every creature, every ship, every weapon is connected. When we destroyed their scouts, the entire swarm learned about our capabilities. They're not just coming to feed anymore. They're coming to eliminate us before we can spread. The implications hit the Thylorians like a cold wind. You mean we've made them angry? Worse than angry, Colonel Webb said. We've made them afraid. And a afraid swarm is a desperate swarm. They'll throw everything they have at us, including weapons they've been saving for their final expansion across the galaxy. Admiral Zethara felt a chill run through her fur. How many ships are we talking about? Dr. Sato's expression was grim. Long-range sensors are still getting readings, but preliminary estimates suggest over 10 million bioships, including dozens of planet killers and what appears to be their primary hive ship. The Queen ship, Elena said quietly. The central intelligence that controls the entire swarm. If our intelligence is correct, it's over 2,000 kilometers long and carries the genetic templates for every species they've ever consumed. Can we win? Zethara asked. The humans were quiet for a long moment. Finally, Colonel Webb spoke. We don't know. We've never faced anything this big before. But I can tell you this, we're not going to run. And we're not going to let the swarm continue consuming innocent people. Even if it means your own extinction? Elena nodded. That's what makes us human, Admiral. We'd rather die fighting than live knowing we let monsters win. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars where the swarm was approaching. You asked the stars for aid against monsters, and we answered. We just hope that when this is over, you don't decide we're worse than what you were fighting. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The swarm had accelerated beyond all previous estimates. They would be here in 6 hours, not 12. And they were bringing more ships than the sensors could count. The first planet to die was Thylos Minor, a small world on the edge of the system that housed 12 million colonists. Admiral Zethara watched it happen from the bridge of her flagship, knowing she was seeing the end of everything she had sworn to protect. The swarm didn't just attack planets, they devoured them. Millions of bioships descended on Thylos Minor like locusts, covering the surface in a writhing mass of organic machinery. Within hours, the planet's crust was being broken down into raw materials. The atmosphere was processed into breathable gases for swarm creatures. Even the planet's core was being slowly consumed. Admiral, her communications officer said, his voice shaking, we're receiving final transmissions from the surface. The colonists are. They're still alive down there. The swarm is keeping them alive while they process everything else. Zethara closed her eyes. She had hoped for a clean death for her people. Instead, they were being kept as living resources until the swarm decided they were no longer useful. Cut the transmission, she ordered. She couldn't bear to hear any more. On the tactical display, she could see the full scope of what they faced. The swarm fleet stretched across hundreds of millions of kilometers of space. Bioships the size of moons moved alongside clouds of fighters that numbered in the billions. At the center of it all was the Queen ship, a massive construct that looked like a cross between an asteroid and a nightmare. The human fleet, by comparison, looked pathetically small. Admiral Chen had positioned her ships in a defensive sphere around Thylos Prime, but there were only 50 human vessels against millions of swarm bioships. Admiral Chen, Zethara called over the communication link. Perhaps we should evacuate the homeworld. There are too many of them. Chen's voice came back calm and steady. Negative. If we run now, they'll just follow us to the next system, then the next. Besides, we have a few surprises left. What kind of surprises? The kind that might crack the planet we're standing on. I hope your people are ready for this. Before Zethara could ask what that meant, space itself seemed to tear apart. The human ship designated Terra's hammer fired something that wasn't quite energy and wasn't quite matter. The weapon struck the nearest swarm moonship and simply erased it from existence. leaving behind a perfectly spherical void in space where something weighing billions of tons had been moments before. But the swarm barely noticed the loss. For every bioship the humans destroyed, 10 more took its place. And they were learning. Zathara watched in horror as swarm creatures began to adapt their armor to human weapons in real time, growing new defensive systems as the battle progressed. "Admiral Chen," she called out, "they're adapting to your weapons." "We noticed," Chen replied. "Time for Protocol Omega." Across the human fleet, ships began moving into new positions. But instead of attacking the swarm directly, they turned their weapons on the system itself. The gas giant Thylos Major exploded. It didn't just explode. It was carefully destabilized in a way that turned the entire planet into a gravitational weapon. The shockwave tore through space, ripping apart any swarm ships caught in its path. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from other star systems. "You destroyed a planet," Zathara screamed into the communication link. "We turned it into a weapon," Chen corrected. "And we're just getting started. All Thylorian ships retreat to minimum safe distance. Things are about to get much worse." The humans had turned the asteroid belt into a minefield. As swarm ships tried to navigate through the debris of the destroyed gas giant, hidden human weapons activated. Asteroids became kinetic missiles, moving at significant fractions of light speed. Comets were turned into fusion bombs. Even space dust became deadly as human technology accelerated it to impossible velocities. But the swarm kept coming. They lost millions of ships to human weapons, but millions more pressed forward. And slowly, inevitably, they began to surround the human fleet. "Admiral," Colonel Webb's voice came over the channel, "we're being flanked. Swarm forces are moving around our position. They're going to cut us off from the planet." "Let them come," Chen replied. "All ships prepare for close combat. Marines, stand by for boarding actions." Zathara couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Admiral Chen, did you say boarding actions? You're planning to board swarm ships?" "Affirmative. Sometimes you have to get up close and personal." The first human Marines hit the bioships like viruses attacking a cell. They cut through armor with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics, carved their way through organic corridors that tried to heal behind them, and fought creatures that had been designed for war since birth. But they were only human. Zathara watched the casualty reports climb as Marine units were cut off and overwhelmed. Entire squads sacrificed themselves to plant explosives in critical systems. Others fought to the last man to buy time for their comrades to escape. "Why are they doing this?" she whispered to Dr. Vasquez, who was coordinating human scientific efforts from the Thylorian flagship. "Because it's what we do," Elena replied simply. "Because someone has to." The battle raged for 18 hours. Human ships died one by one, taking impossible numbers of swarm vessels with them. Space around Thylos Prime became a graveyard of twisted metal and organic debris. The humans fought with a desperation and fury that seemed to surprise even the swarm. But it wasn't enough. "Admiral Chen," Zathara called out, as she watched the human fleet shrink to barely a dozen ships. "You have to retreat. You've done everything you could." "Negative," Chen replied. "We're not done yet. You're all going to die. Maybe. But we're taking as many of them with us as possible." It was then that the swarm made their mistake. Instead of simply overwhelming the remaining human ships, the Queen ship sent out a focused transmission toward Thylos Prime. The message was simple and brutal: "Surrender now, or watch your civilians be consumed alive." The transmission was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every human in the system heard it. The threat was accompanied by images of what the swarm had done to other worlds, other species that had resisted them. Zathara expected the humans to finally break, to see reason and retreat while they still could. Instead, Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel, and it was colder than the space between stars. "All human forces, you just heard the threat. The enemy has decided to target civilians. Protocol Omega is now authorized at maximum yield." "Admiral Chen," Zathara said urgently. "What does that mean?" Elena Vasquez was staring at her instruments in horror. "Oh no," she whispered. "They're removing the safety restrictions." "What safety restrictions?" "The ones that keep us human," Elena said quietly. Across the human fleet, weapons that had been held in reserve came online. Not just planet crackers or star killers, but weapons that violated physics itself. Weapons that had been built not for war, but for the complete extinction of enemy species. The remaining human ships began moving toward the Queen ship with purpose that felt different from everything that had come before. They weren't retreating. They weren't even fighting defensively anymore. They were hunting. And for the first time since the battle began, the swarm seemed to hesitate. The change in the human fleet was immediate and terrifying. Ships that had been fighting defensively suddenly became predators, moving through space with deadly purpose. Their weapons fire became more precise, more brutal, and somehow more efficient. Admiral Zethara watched from her flagship as human marines who had been pinned down inside swarm bioships suddenly went on the attack. Instead of trying to escape, they pushed deeper into the enemy vessels, hunting for critical systems with ruthless determination. "Dr. Vasquez," she called out, "what's happening to your people?" Elena's face was pale as she monitored the human communications. The swarm threatened civilians. In human psychology, that crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. "I don't understand." "Throughout our evolution, humans have had to balance two instincts," Elena explained, her voice tight with worry. "The instinct to survive and the instinct to protect others. When those instincts align," she gestured at the tactical display where human ships were carving through swarm forces like knives through flesh. On the main screen, Admiral Chen's face appeared, but she looked different now. The careful control was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating that made Zethara's fur stand on end. "Admiral Zethara," Chen said, "I need you to move all Thylorian ships to the far side of the star. Get as much distance between you and the swarm as possible." "Why? What are you planning?" "We're going to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of when we stop holding back." The human ship Vengeance opened fire on a swarm moonship with weapons that shouldn't have existed. The bioship didn't just explode. It was broken down at the molecular level. Its mass converted to pure energy that lit up half the star system. But that was just the beginning. Human ships began deploying weapons that turned the swarm's own biology against them. Viruses that caused swarm creatures to attack each other. Nanomachines that rewrote swarm DNA on the fly. Energy fields that made it impossible for the bioships to heal their wounds. "How is this possible?" Zethara whispered. "We've been studying warfare for thousands of years," Elena said. "Every conflict, every battle, every genocide in our history taught us something new about how to kill efficiently. We just never had a reason to use all of it at once." The swarm began to retreat. For the first time since they had appeared in the galaxy, the creatures that consumed worlds were running from something, but the humans followed. Admiral Chen's flagship, the Terran Pride, led the pursuit with weapons that created tears in space-time itself. Swarm ships that tried to escape found their faster-than-light drives disabled by human technology that treated physics more like guidelines than laws. "Admiral Chen," Zethara called out, "they're retreating." "You've won."
"No,"
Chen replied, her voice carrying a cold finality. "We haven't won until the Queen ship is destroyed. As long as that thing exists, the swarm can rebuild. They'll just come back stronger next time." The Queen ship was massive beyond imagination, a construct the size of a large asteroid that housed billions of swarm creatures and the genetic templates of every species they had ever consumed. It was protected by layers of bioships that fought with desperate fury to protect their queen. The human fleet cut through them like they weren't even there. Dr. Vasquez was monitoring human battle communications when she suddenly went rigid. "Oh no, what is it?" Zethara demanded. "Admiral Chen is planning a direct assault on the Queen ship. She's going to ram it with her flagship. That's suicide." "Yes," Elena said quietly. "But it's also the only way to ensure the Queen dies." On the communication channel, Admiral Chen's voice was calm and professional. "All human ships, this is Admiral Chen. I'm taking the Terran Pride on a final run at the Queen ship. Continue the attack until every last bioship is destroyed." "Admiral," came Colonel Webb's voice, "there has to be another way." "Negative. The Queen ship's defenses are too strong for conventional weapons. But a ship moving at near light speed carrying our entire nuclear arsenal..." Chen paused. "It should be enough." Zethara watched in horror as the human flagship accelerated toward the Queen ship. Swarm fighters swarmed around it like angry insects, but Chen's ship had become something beyond physics. Its engines were pushing it to speeds that should have torn it apart. "Admiral Chen," Zethara called out, "you don't have to do this." Chen's voice came back one last time, and there was something almost human in it again. "Yes, we do. Someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. Today, it's our turn." The Terran Pride struck the Queen ship at 90% of light speed. The explosion was visible from other galaxies. When the light faded, both ships were gone. The Queen ship had been reduced to scattered atoms, taking with it the central intelligence that had controlled the entire swarm. Across the star system, bioships began shutting down as their connection to the hive mind was severed. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Of the 50 human ships that had entered the battle, only 3 remained. Thousands of human Marines had died fighting inside swarm bioships. Admiral Chen and her entire crew were gone, vaporized in the final explosion. As the surviving human ships regrouped, Captain Maria Santos took command of what was left of the human fleet. She was younger than Chen had been, but her eyes held the same cold intelligence. "Admiral Zethara," she said over the communication link, "the immediate threat has been eliminated. Swarm forces in this system are dead or dying, but there may be other swarm fleets in distant parts of the galaxy." "What happens now?" Zethara asked. Santos was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was tired. "Now we deal with the consequences. You asked the stars for aid against monsters, and we answered. The question is whether the galaxy will decide we're worse than what you were fighting." Over the following days, as the debris was cleared and the dead were counted, other alien species began arriving in the Thylos system. They came to see what had happened, to understand how the unstoppable swarm had been defeated. They found a star system scarred by weapons that could crack planets, filled with the wreckage of bioships that had been torn apart at the molecular level. They found evidence of warfare conducted on a scale and with an intensity that horrified every peaceful species in the galaxy. And they found humans. The survivors were helping with rescue operations, using their advanced technology to search for Thylorian survivors in the wreckage. They were polite, professional, and clearly exhausted by what they had done, but everyone who met them could see the truth in their eyes. These creatures could destroy civilizations if they chose to. They had weapons that violated physics and tactics that had defeated an enemy that had consumed 47 worlds. Some species offered alliances, hoping to gain human protection. Others quietly began defensive preparations, just in case humanity decided to expand their territory. A few demanded that humans be contained before they became the galaxy's next great threat. Captain Santos stood on the observation deck of her damaged ship, looking out at the stars where the wreckage of the swarm fleet slowly tumbled through space. Dr. Vasquez joined her, carrying a datapad with casualty reports. "The final count is in," Elena said softly. 47,000 human military personnel killed in action. Another 12,000 wounded. "We saved 12 billion Thylorian lives. Was it worth it?" Santos asked. Elena considered the question carefully. "We stopped a threat that could have consumed the entire galaxy. We proved that the swarm could be defeated. But we also showed the galaxy what we're capable of when we stop restraining ourselves. And now they're afraid of us. Yes. The question is whether they're more afraid of us than they were of the swarm." Through the observation window, they could see Thylorian rescue ships searching through debris. The survivors were grateful, but there was something different in the way they looked at human ships now. Respect certainly, but also wariness. "Admiral Zethara wants to meet with you tomorrow," Elena said. "She's proposing the creation of some kind of mutual defense treaty." "Or a way to keep an eye on us," Santos said. "Probably both." Santos nodded. "Fair enough. They have a right to be concerned. We have weapons that can destroy star systems, and we just proved we're willing to use them." "Do you regret it?" Elena asked. Santos looked out at the stars for a long moment before answering. "No. The swarm would have killed everything in the galaxy if we hadn't stopped them. But I do regret what it cost us. Not just the lives we lost, but something else. Something harder to define. Our innocence, maybe. Or maybe just the comfortable lie that we're not as dangerous as we actually are." New signals were coming in from other parts of the galaxy. Distress calls from species facing their own threats. Requests for human intervention in conflicts that had been going on for centuries. The galaxy had learned that humans could solve problems that seemed impossible. They had also learned the price of that solution. Santos activated the communication system and began composing responses to the requests for aid. Some she would accept, others she would decline. But all of them would be reminded of the same simple truth. Humans would fight monsters, but monsters should be very careful about what they asked humans to become in the process. The stars were vast and full of wonders and terrors. And somewhere among them, humanity had found its place as the galaxy's protectors. Whether the galaxy wanted their protection or not,